stinks on the wall. Do we look weird when we're behind the counter? It's like behind the counter dirty. What can you see? What do you think?
See it from the customer's perspective.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Is it pretty rigid? Sick.
Yeah. Let's see. If you need to pull it in a little closer, feel free to.
Whoa. Oh my God, they're hardwired.
Yeah.
Whoa. Neat.
There we go.
Big
It's trying to do it. Okay. Awesome.
Sweet.
Zach,
What's up?
we have had a lot of really incredible conversations just kind of like across the counter, coming down to Royal Flamingo all the time. I love it. This actually is the spot that I come every Wednesday whenever the podcast goes live. So
is it every Wednesday? Wow. Okay. I don't think I've docked that. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So it's been a ton of fun. But one of the things that I've really enjoyed over the past 3 or so months of doing this is the conversations that we've gotten to have about the coffee industry, and coming from being a barista for so many years, I love getting to see people who are continually pushing the envelope in all this. So kind of one thing I wanted to open up with, we had a really great conversation the other day about this, was the idea of the craft, but then also not forgetting the service and kind of forgetting why we're here and what we're doing.
Right.
So kind of what are your thoughts on kind of, I guess, 30,000 foot view, state of the industry, and then also, kind of how that applies to being able to actually, serve people really incredible coffee?
Yeah. Sweet. That's a great question. I like to think, and it might not be true. Everyone also might also think this way, but I like to think I have a pretty broad view of the whole industry, and I try to keep that in my mind. And particularly when it comes to the coffee industry, especially when you get into the super specialty sector, you begin to deal with a lot of people that are super into the product that they're serving, and especially either home enthusiast, and I think baristas share a lot in common, at least passionate baristas, where it's you can get really into the weeds of we're serving an amazing product, and I want to know my origin, I want to know my process, I want to dial my pour over, and I think that was a really big component of, I think, the new specialty wave that's hit in the 2000s. Obviously, I don't have most of the experience, but I think what we try to do is try to establish that great quality product that is new, innovative, and elevating your experience is begins as a baseline for what it is to attend Royal Flamingo Coffee. And then in my mind, and I think everyone has experienced this, is the most memorable locations that you'll go to are places that either have phenomenal product, phenomenal atmosphere, or tied to some certain event. But most commonly, you coming in every Wednesday, the person that you're interacting with is your biggest touch point, and the thing that really ends up mattering. If I were to look 30,000 foot view at my cafe, the people that are coming in the most aren't the people that are searching for the best coffee, because they're going to keep going around and searching. They're the people that are connecting between people in the space with them, whether that's baristas or people around them, or even their friends that they're bringing in, and it's just close by. So
yeah, that's something I pretty much across all the industries that I've had the privilege to work in, one of the things that commonly comes up is the people that you're interacting with are the key part of it. And that's one of the things that when I worked in cafes, we were constantly having to remind ourselves is hey, at the end of the day, we want to respect this as a craft, but we also want to remember that these are humans that we're coming in to serve and, be friends with ultimately, because people are, they're going to remember that really great cup of coffee they had, but they're actually going to really, really remember that great experience that they had and the service that they experienced. And we've all had coffee at those places where, the coffee is absolutely out of this world, but then the service was maybe not necessarily so great. And to be able to combine those two things together, you end up with an experience like what you guys have here. And it's one of the reasons I bring everyone that I can to come here and experience it when they're we want to see what Columbus coffee is like. This is what I bring them to, so that they have that top tier experience. Just have to get that out there.
Yeah. I would also like the thing I like to point out to at least customers or people that are like new. We have like a bunch of really fun glassware, and our space is very colorful. I mean, like this is a blue room, we have a pink room, we have a green room. All of it's like super fun and bright, and the music is always upbeat. And we had, the glassware that we pick is also very like uniquely curated, and we don't talk about it a lot, but when we do, I like to point out like we have like very bright pink bags, we have very bright pink cups, and then we have like a little bit of like more muted like dark blues, like orange, and occasionally like yellow ceramics. There's like a very popular study that came out that like hit the coffee world, and everyone was posting about it like 5 or so years ago. That like indicated that like the color of your surroundings or the color of the bag that you're shopping. This is really popular in like retail stores also, highly influences your perception of what you're about to experience, and whether it's like buying a coffee bag and like you're looking at a wall of like brown paper bags in the shop, or if you're like looking at bright pink and bright blue. I think specifically they found that like they think pink indicates some level of like quality or like association with florals. So we have like pink cups that like complement our floral cups, or we have like round and deep blue cups that like complement any of our like our medium roast. And I always like would think to myself, well, like, well, this color has such a unique influence on your experience, then it makes sense that like the way that the person interacting with you and the way that the person speaks about what you're experiencing will also like probably have a bigger effect, because you're interacting with that more and way more intensely, and like you're firing more neurons in the way that you're speaking with someone, interacting and tangibly like communicating with the person that is tied to your product. So
That's awesome. That's definitely diving into like kind of getting into more of the kind of psychology side of being able to create those interactions and those touch points. And I think that's something that like I love to see as like the coffee world is continuing to evolve. We're starting to see more of that because I think, the era that I kind of grew up in was that very like, muted colors, plywood and 2x4s and cement countertops, the pristinely white, not neutral mugs. It had its time and place when we were trying to like put the emphasis on the coffee. But I think now that we're kind of starting to see the like big picture of it, realizing that actually putting it in like a nice pink cup will start to give those like subconscious associations. And that was why, back in the day, we would always, go back and forth as to whether or not latte art was important. And being able to kind of realize like, oh, actually, like having a pretty design on your coffee subconsciously tells you, oh, this is going to be a really good cup of coffee.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're learning from like larger corporations of like, oh, packaging greatly affects the way that people are going to perceive and interact with our products. And I really do like, I think I miss part of the era where like all the coffee shops, like we have a few in town that still are like that. Like I call it like the sterile white cafe,
Yes.
where it's like I'm guessing it's coming from that like mentality or like philosophy of like, if I can remove as much influence and much distraction, we can like get the clearest view of the thing that's in front of us. And that like came along with like we want to have a clear understanding of like origin or terroir, or any specialty product that we're having. But I think like we've moved past that a little bit. I'm at least very happy about it. I don't want to, I think it just ended up feeling very stale, and heartless. And it's like, by removing design in your spaces, you're also removing like the personalization of that space. And it feels less and less like there's a person, more like you're interacting with a vending machine of a building that will give you a really nice product. But like, I could probably go get that anywhere else.
Exactly. And I think like, kind of something I am interested to kind of hear your thoughts and perspective on is like the rise of like technology. I mean, AI is obviously the buzzword in this whole thing, but I mean, I've seen it all the different coffee expos, all these robots that are pouring latte art and all this stuff. And I've heard kind of both sides of the argument on it where, the more we can automate things, the more that the baristas can continue to focus on that human experience. Yeah. But I think the flip side to it is like one of the things that makes baristas truly unique is their ability to have this, kind of craft that they get to share with, their customers, and they get to have this thing that they're passionate about. And I always say that people are most passionate about or they're most connected to people that are passionate about something, and the connection that you're going to be able to make with a customer comes from the background of that, craft that you're being able to share and express with them. But what do you think specifically on like automation in the coffee world?
Yeah, this has been a fun topic recently, especially with like how quickly every industry is dealing with it. But I think I've had a lot of fun like playing with like what are all the ideas, like what could possibly happen, or it's like can AI just like start roasting for us, or like can full automation, like you can have a specialty coffee shop, but it has an auto steamer and then like an Eversys that's automatically pouring all your shots, and you just get to pick your beans, and like the person just takes the order, presses the buttons, make sure that it looks good, and then they send it off. And like, I mean, I have the people that are working on these fully automated machines and these AI programs are like, they're absolute geniuses. And like, I have full faith that like, at least me, I mean, I'm sure there's someone out there that can do way better than me, but like, I believe that those people can figure out how to reproduce what I'm doing with enough time and enough resources and enough like whatever intelligence it is. But it's going to come down to like what's the practicality of it and like how does it feel. And I think there's like that base hope that like things will feel different, but it's like even like without automation, it's like how do we feel when we're interacting with like consumables or commodities that feel batched or like way too like mass produced. And I think that's probably what it'll end up feeling like. Like even if you go to a cocktail bar, like watching a person mix and stir your drink for you, the drink ends up tasting, at least to me, like way better than like if you see them pour it out of a bottle. It's like they're doing the same exact thing behind the scenes, and like rarely is it even like stale. They probably batched it that day for you. But I think we do like we crave that experience. We crave like eating with our eyes, of like seeing the visualization of like there is something happening for me by another person, and that is important. Which is like even when like the X Bloom came out a couple years ago, and I brought my X Bloom Studio I got for Christmas. I was really excited about it. I brought it in. I just stopped doing pour overs for the day because I was like, guys, this is way cooler than me doing this. I'm having a lot of fun, and now I can talk about it. And like that was like a touch, like a small glimpse of like this thing's automated. It's really cool. It's still something passionate in it, but like I ended up removing it because I was like, oh, it's kind of like boring. Like I don't care anymore.
At a certain point, like the novelty of watching a robot make your coffee wears off,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
people immediately just want to go back to that like in-person experience. And I think you kind of hit on something where it's like, we don't want things that are like too terribly batched, because then you start to, I mean, that's usually with companies, that's where the quality starts to kind of like go down the drain.
Yeah.
And so you have that kind of like hard coded in like, oh, this is going to be like fresh and good because the person literally, I watched them make it right in front of me.
Right.
And so I'm always kind of like, that's like a big thing whenever, towards the end of my time in coffee, was always trying to tell people like, hey, like batch brew is totally fine. Like we're making it right now. Yeah. Like, we're still putting the same amount of care and effort, like, kind of educating around the quality of it. But there were still people that adamantly wanted their pour overs because they want to know it's like made specifically for them. And I think like there's that part of it that we'll never be able to remove from like the service industry.
Yeah, 100%. Or like it becomes kind of this like funneling smaller niche of the market, as like people have since learned that like batch brew can be good and it's awesome, and it takes like 20 minutes less depending on where you're at. Like
yes.
And so now there's people that instead of seeking out a place that serves pour overs, are seeking out a place that serves awesome batch brew. And I think part of it, like I would like to believe that like your perspective obviously shapes your reality, but it's like your perspective on like what it is that you like and what you want and what you need will shape how you feel about what you're going and seeking after. And so it's like you move from pour overs to finding a location that you really, really like, and then you find that location, and if that location goes fully automated, it's like, well, now what is the thing that you're seeking after that? Where it's like we have a regular that like obviously not obviously but often talks about like your allegiances to the things that like really matter to you. And it's like obviously family, but it's like we have a lot of regulars, it's like they're really happy to be buying Royal Flamingo coffee, and it's like they're just happy to be a part of the ecosystem, the community, to know the people that are running it, to like come in and interact with us every day. And I think
If, like me, you hate ad breaks and podcasts, well, we're going to keep this one straight and to the point. If you need any production help, feel free to hit me up at brandongoodyear.com. Let's get back into the episode.
whatever ends up happening with automation and whether or not it becomes like more and more like financially like responsible for companies to just start introducing it, because like that's going to be the thing that pushes it. It's like totally for all automation if that means that like all my employees get healthcare and they love their job and everyone here is really happy and the product's awesome. Like I think you'd be hard pressed to find people that like hold on to that like product superiority for so long. Like eventually time and like care for others and like, you know, shifting motivations will lead to that. And of course there's people that aren't like that. Like have you heard of what's his name? Have you heard of Endorphin out in California?
It sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, Endorphins, he's it's one dude. It might be more than one dude now, but for the longest time it's one dude. He owns a shop, will not hire anyone else, makes all of his pour-overs by hand, sources all of his own coffee. And it's like this, like sit down in front of the master and watch him brew whatever he wants to brew today. And that's awesome. And,
that sounds like
he's broken the path of like, we'll do things differently. Or he's like, I'm not going to engage in automation. I'm not going to engage in any like level of making things easier for money, because he's like locked into a vision. So I think it'd be fun to like see what companies end up being like, no, our vision really is this, and we're going to make it work no matter what. So I mean, you're just trading, like, what are your priorities? And it's like, if your priority isn't in hiring a bunch of people and giving them a bunch of like resources and supplies and money and like work-life balance, then like, dude, you can do whatever. You can start making stuff out of a pan. You can mortar and pestle your coffee and someone will buy it. Like,
I think that's definitely like kind of the cool thing about the entire world of coffee. And I think the genuine creativity that comes as a part of that. I remember back in the day, you know, getting green beans from our roaster to take home and, you know, make my own roasted coffee in a popcorn popper, because every barista goes through that phase at some point.
I've been there. It was awesome.
It was so much fun, like just the whole experience of it, but then also getting an understanding, like a little bit more of like this entire process that seems kind of very mysterious to people. And this actually kind of ties into next thing I wanted to talk about a little bit. So a big thing in like, let's call it the past like 10 years or so has been this idea of like testing coffee for mold and like quality and all this other, you know, high quality stuff, mainly from like a health perspective. But one of the best things that I've seen come out recently is people talking like actual, like, you know, coffee graders and roasters talking about how the reality of like moldy coffee that like most of these people are referring to is coffee that's literally been roasted and then sitting for at like a year.
Yeah. So, past crop, too much humidity,
exactly.
Like wrong storage location, 100%.
Yeah. So I was going to ask like kind of what's your thoughts on like, you know, in terms of like quality of coffee and like mold and all that stuff, like how do you see, you know, that right now in the coffee world?
It's an interesting thing. I wish I'd started reading about it like last week, because I think like Scott Rayo made a post on like how to identify coffees with this product or this fault, or like how to avoid your mycotoxins, and people are obsessed about mycotoxins. I'm not sure, because I think it's one of those things where it's like if we're finding out about a problem like this or like a quality control issue, it's like most likely it's been going on for a long time, and the fact that it's surging up right now either means that it like wasn't that big of a deal, or it's like we probably don't know enough to have like solved it by now. So it's interesting to watch and to see. And I think anything that gets like more customer awareness and eyes on quality control is awesome. And especially because like if you're going to be looking at like what mold is growing on your coffee, and is it related to the storage of the coffee or the processing of the coffee or the roasting of the coffee, whether it's mold or like you get like, you know, boring beetles or whatever, like you're going to have to end up looking up a lot about what is coffee and what is green beans and like how do they get sourced and how do they get stored, and like I think I'm excited for that. I'm excited for more like just conversation around it. Um, Honestly, like we're a really small operation. I haven't worked for any large roasters, but like we blow through coffee within a year or less. Like I think one of our most recent coffees we sold out in like 3 months, and we were like, well, we didn't expect that to happen. Um,
That's
so
insane.
yeah, yeah, I'm interested to see, because a lot of like, I mean, especially with how many of our like food codes are like either shifting or not being tracked as heavily. It's interesting to see like kind of what matters, because we had someone come in and ask about if we had non-mushroom coffee or if we had organic coffee, and we like had to look through and we're like, we'll go through and search, but like the term organic coffee doesn't really apply to our like level of specialty, because it's almost like an implication of like if you have to put a nomenclature on the bag that indicates that, hey, this is like safe and produced well, it like makes all the other bags look like they weren't. And it's like,
Interesting.
yeah, I shared that the other day. We had someone come in and ask like what kind of coffee do you source, or like how do you do your sourcing, and we're like, yeah, we think we source some of the best coffee around the world, like bar none. And then they're like, you should like advertise that. And I was like, well, the moment that I have to start saying it is like the moment that I'm like, I don't think anyone will believe me.
Yeah.
So I would like to think that like good sourcing, good practice, and like having a constant like relationship with your producers is a good way of like maintaining quality control. But I would
100%.
love to see like more actual like global health standards on the product, especially with like how the climate's going. Like humidity is a little bit different. Storage and transportation, especially right now, is getting a little bit tighter. And so it's like, how do you test for those things? And it's
Yeah.
like, you can't do it like once it gets up here, but it's hard to pinpoint all the locations, especially when it's like it's passed through so many hands.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that also ties into like helping kind of create more of that conversation around like different processing methods, whether that's, washed versus natural, and kind of everything that goes into it. I know, from my work with like farmers and whatnot, a big part of it is like the pesticides that get sprayed on it. So for a lot of people, that organic labeling is just like an indicator of like, we're not spraying pesticides on this. But I feel like a lot of, from what I'm remembering of like the coffee, the way it's grown and everything, pesticides and like conventionally grown crops is one part of it. But the other part of it is like kind of more of the actual diseases that are hitting coffee. And that's something that I remember, back in 2017, 2018, they were talking about like coffee rust and all these like bacteria that are starting to like
still very big.
A lot of these. How has it changed, or have they been able to like solve that? Or I haven't been tracking that quite as closely.
Rust is getting worse. I think it's like we're entering into like the arms war of, and I mean, I'll be the first to say like I don't know the most about like what are farmers actively doing right now to combat it. But from like I listen to a bunch of podcasts about processing and how they're doing, and I have my background's in biology, and once you reach that point of like coffee rust is like you can look up the I want to say it's the World Atlas of Coffee. There's a website where you can look up all the different genuses that are out there and varieties of coffee, and look up their like susceptibility to leaf rust. And I think one of the things that we've been doing is like a lot of the new varietals that we're seeing are a little bit more robust or resistant to it. And I think it's just like we're going to be continuing, especially with like a lot of the producers that we're working with, or like some of the newer ones are like getting more and more access to functionally like genotype testing, or like some level of PCR where we can go in, we can look at the DNA and understand our varietals, and get more complex blends. But that would be like we're entering into the arms race of like, cool, we need to get more resources and almost like scientific accessibility out to all these producing countries, and to like where people are growing coffee. So that way we can, make strains or like crossbreed, and deal with the same thing with like boring beetles, is like they like specific varieties a lot. But an interesting thing, we partnered with a producer, Lucia Solis. She runs a podcast, also awesome, called Making Coffee with Lucia Solis. You should give it a check out. But her approach is she's came from the wine world, and so she has fantastic education and background in like traditional wine production, and has since gone over into like coffee production, like consulting. And so she was in Guatemala this year, and Guatemala had like a terrible, like almost like weather conditions for the year. Rain season, I think it was either came too late or went too long, whatever it was. Like it made it really impossible to like dry the beds. And because the weather wasn't ideal, they had to end up harvesting outside of their ideal parameters. So it's like you got a lot of underripe berries. You got some, like they try to optimize to have the most ripe and a little bit of overripe. And normally at that point, like people in the producing countries will like their cup grade or currently their Q score, drops below where they can start to sell it as specialty grade coffee. And so what they're able to do, at least with Lucia's help, is they like utilize like that processing technique to combat like the initial bad factors that they had.
Wait, that's insane. I'm so far out from coffee processing. What are they doing now?
It's some of like the like really simple things, but just requires like access to the knowledge of like what you need to do. And so like Lucia's biggest thing is she like is trying to teach and provide access to like fermentation science, and like different ways that you can modulate and like use different yeast or like select for different yeast during your processing to develop your cup profile. So it's like obviously your base product really matters, but if your fermentation is all over the place and providing like chaotic or unbalanced or like even like small levels of impurities, like not helping you, but it's also like it's a value add step where it's like you can also be in control not only of your harvest season, but also like what your coffee ends up tasting like through processing. And we've known this, but the coffee world's been semi-lagging behind like the much older other like commodity sections where it's like wine and beer have like they know what wine yeast they're using all the time. They know how their fermentation goes, and they know exactly what that yeast likes temperature wise, and it's all temperature controlled. And so you get a very, very stable product. And coffee's not like that. And so we're dealing with like way too much uncertainty all the time. And so I think, from my understanding, her like goal down there is to like provide some level of education, stability, and accessibility to like actual practical means. And it's like you don't need to go and buy out like a temperature control like stainless steel keg. It's like, well, how can you like what yeast do you have available? How much can you buy? How can you reproduce it? How do you do temperature control with like actual like resources that are around you? And so like we bought one of her coffees this year. I think it was her first production, and it was like from that Guatemalan like harvest. And she was like, hey, this is like, it was not a great year, but we put in the work to like do almost like not damage control, but like utilize what we have access to still come out with like, I think they got a special grade score on the coffee, and the coffee came out really, really good. It wasn't like blow your socks off. It's not one of those crazy like fermentations. Like it's not a co-ferment. It's not any like whatever double anaerobic. It was a pretty clean processed coffee, but like the concept alone was like exciting and phenomenal to me that I was like, we have to go out and buy it because like this is what matters. Like whether we're beating any of like the environmental factors, like finding ways to like keep the people that are producing our coffee, like one in the green, like financially successful, and also like empowering them to like express themselves in multiple different ways and save their crop and not be at the whimsy of just like global warming and like climate change is awesome. I want to funnel as much resources as we can towards that. And then like obviously also someone's job to like figure out how to not have bad climate effects and to have a better harvest season and to like create like these disease resistant strains. So that's the one that I've been super excited about this year is like, how can processing start to mitigate the effects of all of these like issues that we're having, that we've had for a long time that are just continuing to like buckle down on people.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I honestly, a lot of that is new information to me, and it's
Oh,
really
sweet.
exciting to be able to kind of hear and see how the coffee world has continued to evolve over the past however many years to get to this place where they have an understanding of all these new fancy processing techniques that allow for these incredible coffees. I mean, I think your guys' cafe was one of the first places I had a co-fermented coffee, and it was just like my brain was exploding because it's like this tastes like nothing I've ever had. And it's like, and it's coming from places where you would never expect it. Like, you know, we've all had the wonderful natural processed Ethiopian that tastes very nice and fruity and juicy and delicious and, you know, high
Love
acidity.
'em.
But then all of a sudden you get a, you know, Brazil coffee that is not typically that. And then it has that same level of nice, bright acidity that really like, you know, gets you like interested.
Absolutely.
So I love that. That's super cool. One thing, so I asked people on Instagram ahead of time if they had any questions about coffee because
Oh, sure.
I was,
Shoot.
you know, wanted to help the
Sure,
crew
you asked me
out.
if I had answers. This is awesome. Okay,
No,
great.
I think you'll be good on this. So
Okay.
one of the things that someone wanted me to ask was more specifically around being able to figure out what they like when it comes to their tasting coffee. Because, you know, I think a lot of people, when, you know, you go out for coffee, you go to a diner, you're used to just whatever diner coffee is. But then, you know, you're like, oh, I'm going to go try all these other places. And there's usually in the 3 minutes you have to get your order, grab your drip coffee and hit the road, there's not a lot of time for that education. So what is like something that people can be continuing to look for and when they're going to buy coffee, brew it at home, get it at a cafe that can kind of help them start to refine their palate to be able to discern those differences between the coffee they're getting from maybe like a, you know, sheets versus coming into a cafe like what you guys have?
Yeah. Oh gosh, my brain's like running. There's so many different ways to approach that. I'll approach it from, and I hope this is the kind of answer that they're looking for, but it's like if you're trying to look at what do I end up liking when it comes to like drinking black coffee or espresso, like obviously if you're going to cafes and you're like, I'm trying to figure out the whole menu, that's like a whole other conversation. And the best option is like go look at a YouTube video and then just go down the line at one cafe. You can ask around on like your like city's Reddit, like what cafe should I go to try these things? And they'll have great responses most of the time. But if you're looking at black coffee, and specifically trying to understand, like I remember when I started, I went to a local roaster, and I was just buying a pour over of like one bean, and then I would go down the line every day. And woe is me, that coffee, like every coffee to me, theirs tasted almost exactly the same. And I was like, I don't get it. Like, I really want to get it. I felt like someone was in the in crowd and I was out, and I was like, this sounds really cool. And everyone around me looks really cool in this cafe. And I want to understand what this coffee is doing.
That reminds me of whenever I first got into coffee, we all had to go spend time with our coffee roaster and they would bring over the different coffees. And they're like, okay, tell us your tasting notes. And they started going around and I was the last one to give my notes. And I literally, as I was sipping it, all of the notes that everyone else expressed was the exact opposite of what I was tasting. And in that moment, I was like, I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. So I think like the way that taste is built, and this will take some work on your part, but it's like the way taste is built is like comparative. It's like the brain learns taste and smell and all these things through like differences. And so like if you only taste one coffee every week, you will probably not really get an understanding of what you like. The best option, and it does take some work, so we'll start here as your first option, is like go to a cafe, ask for like what are their two most different coffees, and then take those home and drink them at the same time or cup them. And then the next best option is like try different roasters, because the thing that I learned at the roaster that I was going to is like all of their coffees actually did end up tasting relatively the same because they were buying a very similar palette. And so you'll find out that like roasters themselves have like coffees that they really like, and they will build their own kind of like taste and palette around it. So the best option is like go to different roasters to try these coffees, and and then try to buy as many like different sounding things as you can, whether that's like by process or like sometimes tasting notes can be helpful, but I think process would be helpful. So yeah, that's what I mean. That's like the easiest, like the most, like if you want to get there fast, is buy different coffee from different roasters and then taste them side by side. And then you can begin to ask questions. And I think like online resources are great. I mean, if you're nearby to a shop like ours where it's like sometimes on the weekdays, you can go in and talk with a barista. That if like you see that barista like enjoys themselves and is passionate about it, or ever like you can test the waters and be like, what do you think about this coffee? And give them your notes. Like what you're tasting is totally real all the time. And sometimes coffees don't taste that crazy or the notes aren't that real. But sometimes they're really strong. Like the coffees that we have, like co-ferments will taste like bombs. Like go find a co-ferment if you can. Like Google your city and look for co-ferment coffee and you'll be super excited about it because it's going to taste very different than Sheetz coffee. And maybe you'll hate it and maybe you'll go back. But find things that are very different from each other and taste them as quick, like side by side as possible.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really opened it up for me was actually getting to go to a coffee cupping for the first time.
100%.
Because to your point on it, like as soon as you're able to taste things side by side, you're immediately going to be able to pick up on, oh, this one has like a little bit more of that kind of like earthy taste to it. It's a little bit more nutty, chocolatey flavor. Yep. And then, right next to it, you have something that'll taste, straight up like blueberry or like 100%. The peach co-ferment still in my mind tastes like peach cobbler. And it's like
awesome coffee.
It blows my mind every day. And I've brought a few friends in, and every time they're like, wait, I didn't know coffee could taste like this. Like it, you start getting, and then, you tie that into like the craft cocktail world and wine and all these other drinks that we all consume. And it's like you start to realize like there's kind of a lot of overlap in like, the fine coffee world versus the fine wine and other drinks, which I think is like really cool. And I hope that, one of the things that I'm like continuing to hope and see is like this, coffee industry continues to move forward is we can get to a place where, just like that guy out in California, you can have a place where it's like people are expressing the purest form of this craft.
Right.
Because like, I think right now I see the biggest conflicts that I see in the industry is like we have something that is trying to be a commodity, but then also trying to also have a like craft version of it.
Yeah.
And I think like so many people would prefer to go directly to the craft side of things, but financially or for whatever reason, they have to stick with the commodity. And so, but then trying to conform every single craft space into that commodity square, that's where I feel like things start to get a little bit iffy.
Yeah. I mean, you have to find like your Goldilocks zone. Because it's a tough industry to be like in any service industry or any place that serves other people every single day is like there's not a ton of profit margin, and depending on where you're at, there might not be a ton of demand. Like it's much easier to open, especially shop in big cities than it is to like in like small rural towns. Like it just won't work, and you'll have to sell commodity. So it's like it's location and like personal preference and like what's your appetite for putting on the show and sticking to it. It's not easy, but it's like super fun and rewarding, and you will attract people that really care if you're putting out something that requires you to care a lot about it in the first place.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
What's one of the things that you're most excited for, like in the coffee industry now and going forward over the next, let's say, 5 years?
Yeah. I am interested how AI is going to end up working. I don't think it will affect me anytime soon, but I think I believe that AI will create much more consistent roasting for on back end, just because so much roasting is just like pre-programmed. So if we can start to get like roasting AI that like responds to ambient temperatures and all these like variables that change throughout the day, I think that'd be awesome. Most people probably won't notice it, but it would be a huge convenience ad for people that are already putting beans in a roaster and pressing a button. Like, it would just be a better product for everyone. But no, I think that like for me personally, it's like that what Lucia is doing and like increased accessibility to like whether it's social media or like promotion of like what our producer's doing is still going to be like I think where the world's going to end up going, and I'm excited about that. It's like can we hear about like Julio Madrid or Edwin Urania or like, oh, like people always hear about Panama geishas, but I'm like, I would love to hear more about like who are growing those Panama geishas and like what are they doing and why are they doing it, rather than just like buying the coffee and growing it really well, which is awesome. But it's like, I want to see more educational aspects. I love the science of it. I love fermentation science. And I love like the possibilities that are opened up by like having readily accessible yeast strains that you can use for your processing and like playing around with those and like creating new profiles. Like I think we have a long way to go when it comes to like the high end of specialty coffee innovation, even at like the black coffee. And then once we get past that, we'll enter into like that like fourth, fifth wave that like all the liquors have already done, where it's like once we have really figured out how to make a really good gin, now how do we make a cocktail out of it? So like once we have really figured out how to like create our own processed geisha, it's like now we have figured out our base spirit. Now what can we do with it? So I think that'll be cool. Like the fourth wave is really niche and limited, but it has a lot of upward mobility, and that'll be harder to automate. So maybe that solves the whole AI problem. Is we're back to making cocktails, but now with an espresso machine.
I think that would be
a ton of info.
That'd be really cool because I feel like the drinks that we've been consuming for coffee have been largely unchanged for several hundred years at this point.
100%.
I mean, we put milk in coffee and then occasionally we throw some sugar and flavored syrups. But like, how do we like, what do you feel like would be like the next evolution of it? I mean, I know we've talked at length about Brewleg and like, their new way of making cold brew in a way that's way more palatable than how cold brew has been made forever. But could that potentially be the thing that's like the base of a drink? And then instead of having to be this, milk focused drink or whatever it is, you can start to get more into that like craft cocktail side of things.
Yeah. I mean, the commodities section will always exist and people will love like all the products that exist right now and all the drinks like will continue to exist because people love them. That's why they work. But I think you're looking at like the smaller spaces that are going to work towards that like base of specialty cocktail drinks. I think it's like way more consistency and scalability that will be kind of our limiting factor right now, because there are places that like have awesome coffees that they put into like specialty milk mixed drinks, but it's like available at their one cafe and it's reliant on like buying the entirety of a lot. Like it's the same thing that you'll see with those like really big mega specialty roasters, is that they can't buy like the super awesome coffees that like smaller roasters can. Is because it's like there's just not enough produced on it. So I think as like, climate willing and the world willing, like if we can get more awesome, traceable, like well-processed coffees that we can buy in mass and like reliably build on them, I think that'll be a better base, because it's like we're all working with espresso blends because they're like reliable. You can buy a ton of it and you can like mix and match and replace it on the back end.
Yeah.
Because like even right now, it's like we have a specialty in our shop that is doing awesome, and I'm selling out, and like I couldn't hold it on to it for more than a year. And it's like if you went to a cocktail bar that could only serve you a drink for 3 months, and they're like, and then we ran out of that product entirely, and it's never coming back because it's just going to change. It's like it's not going to sell well, because like you need longer times to market it and to be able to do it out mass. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I love to kind of like pull the curtain back on for a lot of people, is like the idea of consistency in the coffee world. I mean, I remember, one of the shops I've worked at in town a number of years ago, we had a giant garage door. And I remember in the middle of summer, everyone's like, oh, can we open the garage door? And reluctantly, we would all be like, okay, let's do it. And then humidity, temperature, air pressure, all the things. Let me just tell you, we were redialing an espresso every 20 to 30 minutes. Like it was a nightmare to keep things consistent. But it's like as a customer, you come in and you're like, I expect this to be the same good coffee all day, every time I come in. And the ingredients that you're putting into that are anything but consistent. And especially when it comes to like making a roast, I'm interested, like, you were saying like being able to build an espresso blend is great because you can make it consistent. I was just having a conversation with someone a few weeks ago over at Florin, and he was talking about how one of the problems that they're running into when it comes to like blends, and if like the ingredients that go into a blend are not available year over year, then a lot of people, they come to know and love a coffee because it tastes a certain way.
100%.
And then trying to like recreate that same kind of taste with, different ingredients is increasingly difficult.
Right. That's like I read a book a long time ago, so I might not know the exact facts. I think it's like The History of Coffee. That sounds about right. It's whatever. Christopher Farron has an awesome like catalog of books on his website. I think it's like Christopher Farron, or you look up Avery, they have a bookshelf. Awesome books on coffee. But it went over like the history of, I think, Nestle and Folgers. And Folgers was the one that's like, when they started out, they had coffee that people loved, and they were like one of the first people to like be selling coffee and roasting it. And as they grew with size, they ran into that same problem where it's like, we now have like a palate that people expect from a product that we're selling worldwide or like US wide at the time. And now, but like, that's not how crops work, especially with like a fruit that is very, very different all the time. Like even like your apples, like apple to apple, are not consistent. And so they like created like the blend of all blends. Like I want to say like the number of beans that they have in is like 47. It's like 47 different coffees that are like getting roasted to smithereens. And like, but it's like if they have like scientists, it's like their whole job to develop this palette and to like seek out products and like to seek out harvest like year to year to keep this thing going. And obviously they have contracts to like reproduce, but it's like maintaining that level of like consistency is like something that I've learned recently is like the world really like is in huge demand because it's like comfort. And it's like most of the things we consume are comfort based. So that's like one end of it is like Folgers needs to have like buy out like small countries to make their bean, and then they need to swap out 47 different operations. But even like with us, like we're building an espresso blend and like we're putting 2 coffees in there, and we're like, are we gonna be able to buy this coffee reliably over the next couple of years? And like year to year it changes, and it's tough. Like it's so variable, and I think like maybe you just embrace it and be like, the change is the wave and we love it and it's awesome. I think that's like one of the charms of like the specialty world is like educating your customers and your team is like, yeah, things are going to taste different pretty much all the time. And if you like that, then this is awesome. And this is the space for you. Because you're seeking novelty, which is like one of our, main desires, but it's like totally understand that there's people that seek comfort, which is another probably equally, if not stronger, desire.
Yeah. And also totally valid. But
yeah,
I think that you're hitting on a really great point with that. And I think that's a good thing in that the specialty world is kind of hitting on that like novelty.
Yeah.
And, I was going to ask, but I think you kind of answered the question. Like, would you guys ever consider doing a like 4 blend or a 4 coffee espresso blend? But from my perspective and kind of what you were just articulating on it is like, you're going to be getting to like that level of consistency. So it's going to be that like comfort, but there's not going to be anything that's like really wowing about a 4 coffee blend.
Yeah.
Because at a certain point, you're basically just making it for that like, mediocre. It just solves the problem or it does the job.
Yeah, it's like hard to hit a bullseye with 4 different arrows all at the same time. It's like
exactly
possible, but it's like not going to happen often.
Your bullseye is going to grow.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like I think we want to keep it to almost like at this scale. It's like having less beans makes it more reliable and consistent for us, is because like we can control and gauge those almost like profiles, and track them down. But I'm like, we'd have to be at a much bigger scale to like hit that multi. Like we've had some like crazy blends in the past that were like we use for competition, but like it's like we're using like 5% of a co-ferment, like 30% of like a pretty nice like geisha, and then we're like throwing in like a body component. And so it's like when we're building it out to accomplish like a specific goal, that's like, I don't think it's gonna be a house blend, but it's like you can get really creative espresso blends out there, which, you know, maybe one of those like 5-year future plans where it's like people learn how to do creative blendings. We just have to find the customer appetite for it. Like, people need to learn that those blends can be awesome. But my gosh, they're like not consistent, because like the moment that you hit, like if you're buying a bag from us and it has 5 different beans in it at like 300 grams a bag, you got like what, 60 grams in there? That's like 60 beans. And so it's like your consistency is automatically off just by the basis of like you might get a different ratio of beans every single time.
That might be an interesting concept, like a rainbow bag where it's like, this coffee will never taste the same cup to cup when you brew it at home.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people do that. Most of the time it's like leftovers from the roastery, but
yeah. I've definitely done that a few times at home.
Yeah.
Made my own blends, just whatever's left over.
I think it'd be funny. I think there'd be a few people that'd be willing to pay for it, but I've always loved like the idea of like a little mystery bag, because it's like, it accomplishes all the goals, which is like awesome coffee, new every time, and like, I don't know, just a funny, awesome, cool niche. You can tell it to your friends that you buy coffees without knowing what they are, and they're awesome.
That's pretty cool. You're like, it might be these coffees in your bag.
Yeah, you're getting closer and closer to like coffee gambling. Yeah, and I don't know if that's morally upright, but you know, I don't know where that goes, but yeah, it'd be fun. It's like coffee, like gachas. What are they called? The little like toys that you get from the store with the coins that like you don't know what they are until you get them out.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I don't know the name of them.
This could be a really big business model for us. Is like single dose mystery coffee canisters.
Workshopping this?
Yeah. We're putting it in the Mall of America.
Yeah.
And it'll be awesome.
That's how Royal Flamingo goes commodity.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to do it in our own way, and it's going to be...
We are going to do it our own way. If there's anything I know, we're going to do it our own way, and it's going to be really funny.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah. I'll be on the watch out. That's in the next 5 years. That's my answer for now on.
Awesome. Well, Zach, this was pretty incredible.
Thanks, man.
I really enjoyed the conversation.
This is super fun.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun, and we'll keep the conversation rolling. I can't wait to have some more great coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, dude.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.